If you had to rank the most politically resonant pieces of American pop culture in the last 50 years, I would say this film tops the list. Directed by the most celebrated filmmaker in America at the time, Oliver Stone, JFK, a masterpiece, featured the biggest movie star on Earth, Kevin Costner, saying things like this.
President Kennedy was murdered by a conspiracy that was planned in advance at the highest levels of our government, and it was carried out by fanatical and disciplined Cold Warriors in the Pentagon and CIA's covert operation apparatus.
It was a full frontal attack on the American state as we know it, a 3-hour video essay explaining just how and why the U.S. government, up to and including a former president, colluded to murder John F. Kennedy. More than any other document, this film codified the murder of JFK as a conspiracy in the minds of the American people. There have always been Americans who believed that it was impossible that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone or even shot Kennedy at all. And this view ebbed and flowed in our culture. But by the end of the Cold War, the JFK truthers were largely considered fringe and paranoid. That is, until Stone dressed JFK trutherism in the language of respectability. Once the nation had heard these accusations accompanied by a swirling John Williams score, they became a fixture in American culture.
I'm saying that the spit could not have come from behind. That there had to have been a second spitter.
My cousin acted alone. I did not sanction this.
The lone gunman theory.
We're through the looking glass here, people.
In many ways, it changed the course of history, because you'd have to say that if Oliver Stone had not been given $40 million to make a film about the deep state killing a president, well, then this would almost certainly not be happening right now.
We have an executive order ordering the declassification of files relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades.
Oliver Stone's movie asked a question that the American people have never been able to get off their mind. And that's for good reason. Because the official investigation into the crime of the century was lacking. The CIA and the FBI hid evidence from the fact-finders, and the fact-finders themselves hid evidence from the public. Now in 2025, Donald Trump has signaled he is willing to share the last state secrets remaining from one of the most painful chapters of our recent history. I'm Eli Lake, and this is Breaking History. On today's show, why the murder of the 35th president remains a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma.
Who shot John? Who shot John? Who shot John? Who shot John?
So what happened that day, November 22nd, 1963? What happened to send America down a rabbit hole it has never been able to climb out of? What happened the day JFK was murdered? Well, first we got this.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
The Dallas police arrest Lee Harvey Oswald, and they have his murder weapon, a World War II-era bolt-action Carcano rifle. He purchased it under a phony name.
On page 10 of that catalog is listed the very rifle that was purchased by Lee Harvey Oswald under the name of A. Heidel. It's very simple to purchase this gun. It only cost $12.78.
During his perp walk, Oswald protests his innocence, but drops a strange insight into his life.
No, they're taking me in because of the fact that I lived in the Soviet Union. I'm just a patsy.
The Soviet Union? What? Yes, this former Marine defected in 1959 to the USSR. Well, that's weird. I wonder what... Oh, wait, hold on. What's that?
He's been shot.
Oswald is killed only 2 days after Jack Kennedy's murder by a nightclub owner named Jack Ruby, live on TV. At this point, the world is upside down. How could a rational person not suspect that something funny was going on? A conspiracy makes far more sense than whatever the news is trying to tell you. If Kennedy's murder was in fact a well-conceived plot, perhaps one of the most natural suspects would be America's greatest enemy at the time, the communists.
The Red Report, the story of the communist threat.
It's a fair question, and one that obsessed leaders of our own government. The new president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, was consumed by the idea that it could have been a communist plot, and he was even more concerned by what that would mean for the future of planet Earth.
We got to take this out of the arena where they're testifying that Khrushchev and Castro did this and did that, and kicking us into a war that can kill 40 million Americans in an hour.
Johnson is asking Russell to serve on the commission to deflect attention away from the Soviet Union. He knows that the Cold War is on a knife edge, and an accusation like this could tip us into thermonuclear war. Now that call reminds me of Plato's concept of the noble lie, when a leader has to practice deception in public for a greater good. After all, who wants to be the president of a smoldering crater where America once stood? But the noble lie would come to haunt America because this deception helped undermine the American people's trust in the story their leaders were feeding them. Indeed, in his last interview, the former president admitted to Walter Cronkite that he could not bring himself to believe the official story.
I can't honestly say that I've ever been completely relieved of the fact that there might have been international connections.
You mean you still feel that there might have been?
Well, I have not completely discounted.
Well, that would seem to indicate that you don't have full confidence in the Warren Commission report.
No, I think the Warren Commission study, and I think first of all, is composed of the ablest, most judicious, bipartisan men in this country. Second, I think they had only one objective, and that was the truth. Third, I think they were competent and did the best they could. But I don't think that they or me or anyone else is always absolutely sure of every thing that might have motivated Oswald or others that could have been involved.
Absolutely wild. What on earth must this have sounded like to the average American after years of being told to believe the Warren Report's assertion that Oswald acted alone? Here was a former president of the United States suggesting that he never really could, quote, completely discount that Oswald had been a part of a great unrevealed conspiracy. If the president and a CIA chief didn't believe their own story, why should we expect the American people to? Why should anyone? Well, basically no one did. The fact is that while the finger was pointed at the Soviets from inside the White House, the Kremlin didn't believe Oswald acted alone either, as they had their very own distinctively anti-capitalist conspiracy theory. Seems as though the JFK conspiracy is very much in the eye of the beholder. The Soviets blame the capitalists. Johnson blames the Soviets. Oliver Stone blames the government who sent him to Vietnam. JFK's death has become a Rorschach test, where everyone sees their own worst enemy. You've been watching an excerpt of my podcast, Breaking History. Find it on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.